Welcome back to episode 2, Prop by the Bar. We're here at Salador with my colleague, Michael DeStefano from Gartlands Real Estate, and myself, Gareth Kent from PRP Valuers. And what a beautiful winter afternoon, Mike.
Good to be back at Geelong Salador. Thanks for having us, John.
Well, it's been a whole different world, isn't it, now? COVID lockdown stage 4 came into place, last week? And the best thing about that is all the Melbourne people are stuck in Melbourne, Mike.
Well, well put, I guess. But, it's certainly, where the market has certainly been tipped on its head since we last met. We sat down here, and soon after, Metro Melbourne went into stage 4, and regional Victoria went into stage 3. So here in Geelong, we're part of stage 3. So it's all changed for us again in terms of how we do business. But
it's going to be such a big change for you as agents. I mean, how are you dealing with that? Previously to this, we had so many Melbourne buyers coming down and being involved in our market. What's happening now? How has it affected in the last week? What have you seen?
Well, inquiries just really dropped off.
Yeah.
Melbourne people were, predominantly doing the right thing. They need to, how inspections and all that are organised now. So open for inspections aren't allowed. Auctions,
not allowed.
So in stage 3, we're back to private inspections.
Yep.
And we have to give plenty of notice to sitting tenants. Can only be one person, can't be, a couple come in or so.
Are people still being able to get down the highway to look at properties if they've got it organised and the letters and everything are able to do that?
Yeah, they are. So there has to be some dialogue in and around it. They can't just come through border restrictions and say, I'm going to have a look at it. There needs to be an appointment or some sort of correspondence with them for them to be allowed through. So, we have seen the amount of Melbourne buyers and the interest from Melbourne people drop off.
Yeah.
And I think until we see numbers start coming down again, I think we're going to be, at that stage where the inquiry, it's really turned into a local market again.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I mean, I think there's only one sale I can think of that we've had in the last week that sort of can talk about this issue is in Pakenham Street, retail shop in Pakenham Street. It was just recently sold last week, sold for $950,000, 110 square metres of retail shop, and it achieved a 5.45% yield with a sitting tenant, although that tenant was a travel agent.
Yeah, so I think that result, when you look at it holistically, if you take COVID out, I think that sale is under market.
Oh yeah.
We assessed that at probably around 115.
Yeah.
As a travel agent, there hasn't been anyone, affected, more so. They're not at zero business, they're at negative business because they're actually having to issue refunds. So
really tough time for travel agents.
If you're an investor and you're looking at, investing in a product like that, that you'd have to question the strength of a tenant.
Yeah. So I guess what you're saying is that really an investment sale when your tenants are so weak? And I think before the COVID, we were always saying there was about a 1% difference in cap rate between a property that had a good tenant and a property that was vacant. And now I think what we're seeing is the market adjusting and adopting properties that would have weak tenancies are now being treated as vacant possession. Yeah. And that property would have otherwise sold at about a 4.5% yield, 1.15 like you said.
Yep.
That's a $200,000 discount on that property as a result purely of COVID, because that travel agents, they were trading quite well prior to that.
Yeah, and look, we're probably going to wear different hats here, Gareth. I think you wear the valuer one or wear the estate agent one, always trying to upsell. But I think that sale in isolation's probably had its limitations in it.
Yeah.
I think from an investment perspective, they've bought really well if you've got a long-term view, because it's Paco.
Yeah, and I think on the other hand, you've got to look at some of the other markets. So industrial, we've obviously still got a lot on the market, and the listings seem to just keep growing. Industrial, we've had a couple of big sales too. I can say that there's a large industrial facility in Wills Crescent just sold. I can't release the actual sale price just yet, but it sold, and a really good, strong sale price though. And you've got another one selling Capital Drive, Drovedale. There's been a few others sold around the place. So we've actually had a really strong industrial. It has continued to be strong over the last week, even with stage 4 lockdowns. What's residential doing?
Resi's continued to tick. Again, it's stock that, the whole supply demand that we spoke about last episode, that hasn't changed. So there's not a lot of stock coming up. Usually we're getting primed for a spring season, and now we're in a situation where we can't do auctions or opens again. So there's a bit of a sitting on hand, people sitting on their hands just waiting to see how the next 5 weeks unroll to see if we do come out of those stage 3 and we can return to traditional auctions. But I think, again, from a confidence or a buyer's temperament, we're just waiting to see in which way we're heading in terms of numbers, and with a reduction in numbers comes more confidence.
Mike, talking on confidence, it's a great segue, or a beautiful segue, to take us into our guest for today, our first proper guest on the Property by the Bar, Cameron Hamilton, who joins us from the Hamilton Property Group. Welcome, Cam.
Thank you very much for having us, guys.
Thanks, Cam. So, Cam, I think we first met probably around 17 years ago when I first started getting into the industry, and most people in Geelong would know you from Federal Mills and what you've done there. We can come back to that, but I think what most people will be really interested in is how you got involved in property and where you started to where you are today.
Yeah, fantastic. The first property I ever got involved with was 400 Packington Street in Newtown. My late father, David Hamilton, bought that in 1996. I believe it was from Gartland at the time, yep. Michael, but both of us didn't have too much involvement at the time. But my involvement then was more as a maintenance man, or a janitor, for want of a better word.
You were the janitor, cleaning the toilets, Cam? Cleaning the toilets?
I distinctly remember a time I was cleaning a toilet and plunging it out, and it all came back up at me, and I ended up with it all over my face.
I'll keep reminding you of that, mate. No
well, I keep reminding all of my workers that I did that once myself. So when I ask them to do a hard task that they're not too keen on doing it, that definitely comes out, mate.
Yeah. So you started down there with your dad.
Yep.
How did you get then into where you are now, the king of the property market?
I don't know about that, mate. But anyway, I was involved with some of Dad's developments sort of from about 2000 to 2006. In 2006 was when I bought my first property and dipped my feet in the water, so to say, and we bought a property at 2 to 6 Rutland Street in Newtown.
Remind me, make sure I got this right, that was the offices for the old Sailors and Soldiers wool mills, was it not? And it was just an old factory.
That's correct, and I believe that's the first time we crossed paths again. Since school.
I had the valuation for that property for you.
Since 97, I probably haven't seen you since then, and lo and behold, this guy comes to value the property, and it was Gareth. So we bought that, and it was an old, it had been offices in the past, but it was used as a warehouse for a couple of businesses, and then we set about renovating it into 4 office type units, and we still own that to this day, and it's
fascinating how that formed what you do now. What you do now hasn't moved far from that, because what you did then was buy an old disused building in an old industrial precinct. You took it at what, $45 a square metre rent it would have achieved as an industrial shed, and you turned that into a beautiful offices that are absolutely magnificent with great fit outs, and returning $250, $300 a square metre.
Yeah, that's about right.
Great investment model, fantastic investment model, and then you're still doing that today.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I'd like to think we've learned a little bit since that stage, and the product we offer is developed along with our experience.
Yeah, fantastic.
So that sort of set the blueprint in terms of what you then went on to do.
Yes.
I guess fast forward many years later, Federal Mills. I've crossed paths with you on that property a number of times, I guess.
We both did, Mike. Yeah, you did the sale, I did the valuation.
Yeah, so there you go. Here we are today. Can you tell us what that property was like when you bought it? Because I certainly remember, but our viewers won't know the background of it, and where you are today with it.
Yeah, fantastic. We might rewind a few years first, Michael. As you well know, the first time we had a go at that property was in 2001. And at that stage, we were the unsuccessful purchaser. What we sort of learnt out of that process was that in order to get involved in these bigger properties, we needed to involve other people. And from that day forward, we decided to form a bit of an investment group and get other people along for the journey. We then had another go in 2004. Once again, we were unsuccessful.
Yep.
Until 2013, where once again you had it, where it was mortgagee in possession, and we managed to seal the deal that time. So third time lucky in this respect.
Yeah, and what was the state of the property when you took over? Because I certainly remember, but
I remember the piles of rubbish you made me climb over to try and value that thing.
Literally,
it was huge.
Some portions of that property were, floor to ceiling rubbish, essentially.
Yeah, to say it was a fire hazard is being quite kind, to tell the truth. There was rubbish everywhere. It was well underutilised. Hadn't seen an iota of maintenance in about 13 or 14 years. I think it had about 5 to 10 years in it before it really started falling apart and would have been unsavable. So it involved roughly about 12 months of just clean the old timber out. I think there was about 170 mattresses. We're talking thousands of tyres, just stuff strewn everywhere. So fair to say we developed some pretty good relationships with some rubbish removalists at that stage.
Yeah. And the vision, because when you bought it, it was an industrial zone, industrial 2, which, you know, today you're a business park or an office park or however you know, whatever terminology you want to use. But under the old industrial 2, that's a prohibited use.
Well, not strictly prohibited, but I suppose frowned upon, to want of a better word. Look, when we looked at it, we knew it could be something special. We knew the buildings had to be saved, and so we sort of set about, just discussing with council, the various surrounding landowners and stakeholders as to what it could potentially become. One key point in this is noting the fact that it was Victorian Heritage listed.
Being Heritage listed actually was really heritage listed. I mean, this building, built in 1915, it was Australia's response to the First World War, because we'd gone to Gallipoli, got massacred by the English sending us up cliffs, and then we decided as a population we needed to separate ourselves from England and provide for ourselves. And this was one of the first things the government did, was build the Federal Wool Mills to provide soldiers' uniforms. And so all the soldiers from then on were provided by uniforms made in Australia, rifles made in Australia, everything was made in Australia after that. And we had a unified population around that made in Australia thing. And the Federal Wool Mills was the key and the central point to that policy at that time. So it is a heritage listed building, and it's significant not just to Geelong but to our nation of who we are. So it's a beautiful old building, and now have a look at it. Tell us what it is now.
Yeah, look, I suppose we've spent, since 2013, we're nearly finished now. I say we're 95% complete, and we've spent that sort of time renovating it piece by piece, building by building, to get to the state it is now, which is, I might be biased, but fantastic office space, a completely different offering to what you get in central Geelong or other buildings around town. We've got, loads of car parking, fantastic garden spaces, barbecue areas, basketball courts.
And about 25,000 square metres of office space over how many tenants do you think? There'd be 100 tenants?
There'll be about 40 tenants out there. We house approximately 1,100 people out there at the moment.
1,100 employees out of there. What a fantastic. So when it was the Heritage Footer Wool Mills, how many did it employ as the old wool mills in 1915?
900, I believe, was its peak in the 70s. It obviously started dropping down from then as tariffs were wound back, but it continued as a woolen mill up until 2001.
So it's actually now employing more people than what it did as a wool?
Exactly right, which we think is a fantastic outcome for the area. And as we all know, North Geelong has been quite disadvantaged for a while, especially with the losses of those blue-collar workers, blue-collar jobs, now this presents a new opportunity for the area to reinvent itself.
Exactly.
Are you at capacity?
No, we've got a capacity for another 300 people, I'd say, out there.
So you've got a winning formula. Why old buildings, Cam?
We always say we love buildings with problems. The more problems, the better. So these buildings are riddled with asbestos, contamination issues, they're nearly derelict. So we love, we pride ourselves on solving those problems.
Yep.
Bringing the phoenix out of the ashes.
Your words, Gareth.
Well, congratulations. So testament to your vision and your hard work, and I think Geelong's a better place for having developers like you, Cam. You've seen something that others don't. So I think what you've done at Federal Mills is amazing. What other developments have you got in the works?
Well, I suppose worth mentioning is just next to Federal Mills, we've got the old Pilkington Glass building. We've had that since 2006, and we've decided to have another go at renovating that to bring it to the top-notch standard that Federal Mills is.
Okay, so office again?
Yeah, a bit of a mix of office and retail. Yep. So we've got some 11,000 square metres there, which we're about halfway through renovating at the moment, and we're really excited about how that's going to come up.
So located in the corner of Mackie Street, and for our viewers, Mackie Street and the highway, a big white building, going to have a new frontage to it. It's very easy for our viewers to see this one, understand exactly where it is. But what are you going to do? Is it going to be the front of it going to be changed, or are we still going to see that beautiful old white glass building that was built in 1970s, or were you going to change it up a bit?
1936 actually.
1936, there you go.
I think it's had 12 iterations, so 12 different renovations up until about 74 was the last renovation. So it is in fact heritage listed as well. It's a common theme with a lot of our properties. So we're looking at retaining the corner as white and going back to the red brick for a lot of the rest of the building. And the real showpiece on this one's going to be the rear facade. We're doing a big glass facade that sits underneath the original sawtooth.
So this is what faces the highway?
Yeah, well, the rear facade actually faces Federal Mills.
Okay.
So we've sort of made it all closing together and become one sort of precinct.
Oh, wow.
Oh, excellent. And tell me, I remember valuing this for you many years ago as well. And I remember inside there was these beautiful head offices of the old Pilkington's glass with timber-lined walls. And there was the manager's office, which had timber-lined walls, its own ensuite. I think it had its own bar. And you haven't made that your own, have you?
No. It seems to be quite a bit of a theme for these managers in the late 60s type thing. I remember seeing the exact same thing at the Valley Worsted Mills, which is now Little Creatures. That one was even more extravagant. But no, we've taken out the timber and we've gone a complete new fresh look. Yeah, more of your industrial style. It's come up really well, and I'd love to take you through there again and hopefully give us a slightly higher valuation this time, mate.
I'll have to talk to the bankers about that.
I really want to ask you about, Cam, is another iconic building, another old one. I love the way that you're repurposing heritage buildings, but Thomas's on the corner of Mallup and Moorabool Street.
Oh, beautiful building. Adelaide Stone, love this building.
Tell us,
really excited. We've actually teamed up with a fantastic local developer, he was responsible for the building we're sitting in right now, I believe, Bill Votsaris on that one. Yep. So we set about creating, I suppose, Geelong's best hospitality venue on one of Geelong's best buildings. The building was originally made with the best materials available, so we've thought about replicating that as a rooftop restaurant and bar with a top rooftop deck which will have some of the best views in Geelong.
So I understand you're actually placing another 2 levels on top of the existing structure.
Exactly right. Quite a feat. It sounds easy, but a lot of engineering and a lot of behind the scenes work on this one.
Built on the roof, or is it a crane
No,
pre-built?
Built on the roof, so I apologise in advance for all the Geelong residents when we're shutting down some streets and the rest of it, but anyway, this is necessary for progress.
Important question, Cam, for me. Is the bar going to be open 24/7 or...?
The bar's going to be open as long as I can have it be open. We've got some restrictions with council and all the rest of it, but I've actually asked the new operators whether I can book my own table and have my own plaque on the table. They've refused, but anyway, it's something that I'm going to spend definitely a lot of time and a lot of Friday afternoons.
It is a beautiful building. It's an Adelaide sandstone building. There's only one other building like, I think, which is in Adelaide. As its sister building, so it's a beautiful building and it's iconic. It's on the corner of Moorabool and Mallup Street. Am I right there? Yep. No, yeah, it is, and which is a beautiful spot. And from the top rooftop, you've got views of the whole bay everywhere. So if you're going to build this structure, you're going to have full water views and over the city of Greater Geelong.
No, and those views actually can't be built out. The majority of the views can't be built out due to the fact that Moorabool Street runs straight down to the bay.
Yeah, beautiful.
So we're very excited, together with the Green Spine and the other activity, NDIA WorkSafe happening on Mallup Street. We think it's the best location in Geelong.
And I remember when we looked at that one too, that you had these beautiful bronze staircases and stuff, balustrades in the staircases and all this sort of heritage stuff right through the building. It's beautiful, not just on the outside, but on the inside. Have you managed to preserve some of these parquetry floors and the lifts and bronze things?
Definitely, we love that sort of stuff. And interestingly enough, there is no heritage overlay on the internal features.
That's crazy.
And, we just love to keep these things, and it was amazing. We've pulled up 4 layers of floor before we come across the original herringbone flooring underneath, which just comes up amazing once we've sanded it back and got it all going. So
ETA on the roof?
We're hoping about 12 months.
Great.
So just finalising the building permit documents as we speak. They should be done within 2 months, and then 9 to 12 months for the build.
So before you go, Cam, the wool stores down in Packen Street, right down the very end, there's a bit of work going on down there, and from what I've seen from some of the parts of the building next door that's been released, The fit outs are immaculate. They look fantastic. Well done. Congratulations on the fit outs. And from a valuation point of view, you've helped me out a lot because you set a new bar of rentals in the area, and I had no rents at over $300 a square metre for office down there. So I appreciate you pushing the market for me, mate. But, you know, what are you doing down there? Give us a bit more of feedback.
Well, down there, you know, it's a similar offering to Federal Mills, but we really decided to step it up. You know, immaculate central gardens, glass roofs, you know, anything you could think of. It's sort of where I let my imagination run wild. So we needed to achieve those 300 plus a metre rentals to justify those inclusions. Yep. And it seems to be, you know, very well taken at the moment.
The whole river precinct for me has always been really interesting because when Geelong was first formed as a township, it was actually formed around the Barwon River before it was formed around the waterfront of the bay. So the Barwon River and the area and the whole industrial precinct that runs along there is rezoned mixed use, so it allows for these extra different uses. But there's still acres of really good old industrial properties that haven't been phoenixed yet or haven't been given a new lease of life yet. Do you see lots of potential down there?
Definitely heaps of potential. It's only the start. You know, we see in Melbourne, everyone gravitates towards the river. We've got high-rise apartments and everything going along the river. We just haven't followed suit yet in Geelong. So this is our attempt to get that to happen. And, you know, we've got 4 or 5 properties in that area at the moment. So it's always been an area that we're very interested in.
Oh, I'd love to yell out to all the landholders down the Barwon River. I mean, there is just so much potential down, and the time is now to start building them. And just there's one other question I want to ask you. I have a building that is my favourite, which I call the keystone for Geelong, because the changing in this building will change the outcome of retail along Moorabool Street. It will change the way that we treat Little Mallet Street, and that is the Bright Hitchcock building, which is on the corner of Moorabool Street and Little Mallet Street, corner of the mall. It has the bandstand above it. You and the Votsaris team have gone and taken that building. It's got, 12 or 15 shop frontages on the ground. It dominates Moorabool Street. What are you going to do?
We've got a planning permit application in there at the moment for a mixed-use premises, lots of office. It offers some fantastic wide span spaces up top, big 7 metre plus tall ceilings, and we're looking at another rooftop bar and restaurant that overlooks the mall.
Be good.
We really think about some of the problems that the city's facing, and one of the key ones is the mall. So if we can get a bit more visual aspect and people looking over the mall, we think it'll go some ways as to solve that problem.
Well, you know, Cam, I always judge a building by how many bars you can get in it. So we've got the rooftop bar at Thomas & Jewellers and another rooftop bar at Bright Hitchcock. I'm loving it, mate.
Well, fun fact on that building actually is that little do people know that it actually used to be the Geelong Football Club's gym back in the 80s under Tommy Hafey. So I think it's still decked out with saunas and mirrors.
Exactly the same as it was, mate, although a few more pigeons now.
Yeah, that's right. Cam, thanks for joining us. Been a real pleasure to have you as our first guest on Prop by the Bar. We do know you got about 6 or 7 other projects on the go, which we'd love to talk about. But if anyone wants any other further information, they can see it all on Cam's website. And again, thanks for joining us, Cam, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
all the
Cam.
best.
What a great chat with Cam.
Oh, what a great guy.
Doing amazing
and
things.
the vision he has.
Talking about vision, let's get straight into property of the week.
55 Maud Street I got for you this week, Mike.
Yeah.
55 Maud Street, the old Geelong Grammar building. And for the viewers, this building is absolutely beautiful. I think we've got a sandstone exterior. We've got a Gothic Tudor building, one of the original buildings of Geelong. And it was built, I think, maybe as the Grammar first or something else first, but it was...
I think it was Geelong Grammar's first campus.
Yeah, and it was beautiful. And I remember when this property was sold 5 years ago for $2.2 million. I inspected the property then, and it was just, there was different rooms, there was the old libraries, there's all that sort of stuff. And there was one set of staircase to the top floor that was timber that you would never get past in a building requirement for fire safety and stuff. So it had a lot of issues, and I just imagined myself with this building on fire, me trying to get out of the top floor, mate. I was terrified. I didn't even want to inspect the top floor of this thing. But you know what? It's a beautiful building from the outside. Now, this building has come back on the market, and it was sold for 2.2. It's been sold, I think, another time in between then, but I don't have full records of that. But it's a student accommodation now. So what they've done is they've converted it to 27 student accommodation rooms, and in this market, that's actually probably not a bad use. So what's happened in the market is the big providers of student accommodation, Deakin University and others, have shut down their accommodation provision, which means that the students are forced to go into these other more private operated student accommodation buildings. Now, that's a really good market to be in, and there's a huge demand for student accommodation within the Geelong region. I think we're still in the era where Deakin said they were growing at 1,000 students a week. Now, I know with COVID and with the overseas population, that's slowed down greatly, but we're going to still see a huge, because the big providers of accommodation have stopped, we're still going to see a lot of emphasis on this need for student accommodation within the CBD limits. But it's an investment sale, right? It's an investment sale, and there's certain things about this investment sale you need to consider.
So, good segue into me asking my next question was lending. How does one look at lending?
A lot of banks won't look at this type of property. A lot of banks won't look at them. I think you need to go to the bank. It's probably going to be a second tier or a third tier lender that looks at something like this. A lot of banks, just as a blanket rule, won't look at student accommodation. And the reason being is because in Melbourne and in some of the major capital cities, student accommodation has been a bugbear for banks. We're talking very small developments, large developments with very small apartments that have been offered to the market on guaranteed rental returns that never made fruition, that were just an investment bubble that blew up. And that blew up in about 2007, 2008, especially around Carlton and around the Melbourne University. And it's never really recovered. So student accommodation inside privately owned, not run by the big operators, but privately owned, has always been a bit of a bugbear, and a lot of banks won't even touch it. And the reason being is because there's too many moving parts. So the tenancies that these guys can take on are residential tenancies only, Mike, so that you can't get a guaranteed rental out of these properties. You've got to have individual tenancy agreements with every single person that's in there. You've got to take into consideration the occupancy rates and the return that I think they're quoting $397 a square metre return for this property. Now that would
$396,000 per annum.
Yeah, no, that would be a gross return, right? So a gross return. So what you've got to pay out of that is your land tax, your outgoings, and all your other costs, everything. So those has got to be paid outside of that. So as a rule of thumb, we take off about 25% or 20% of that income and apply that to the outgoings. And that'll pull it back to about $350 of net.
So your valuations worked on the net, obviously?
Yes, we only work on the net. So, and then you've got to also take into consideration that you're not going to have full occupancy. A building like this have such changing in lease agreements with such short terms, and the ability that the renters can, with 2 weeks' notice, get up and leave. As a valuer, you need to build in an occupancy rate, and so as a valuer, we'd apply 85% occupancy. So that's saying that 15% of the time, so 15% of the building will always be vacant at any particular time, and we would build that in as a matter of calculation into our calculations of value. So we would that's $350,000 in rent that's being, say, that's net. We would then take off another 15% to say that would always not be there. All right. Yep. So we'd be getting down to a rental of $300,000, and then we'd be capitalising that at about 8%.
Comes with problems. Beautiful building, but there's attributes close to the CBD. So interesting to see what happens with this one. Look,
Mike, this has been sold by a Melbourne agent. I'm not sure if they understand the history of the property, but it's checkered, right? And it's going to be very interesting to see how the market accepts it. It's an investment sale, and in this market where investors are looking for anything outside the banks, because the banks aren't providing any sort of return for money planked in the banks. There's gold is giving some sort of return. The share market is a bit stagnant and a bit up and down. Investors are looking for something. This could be an indication of what the COVID climate is for investors, and I'm really keen to see how they react to it.
Well, time will tell.
Thanks,
time will tell. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in to episode 2. We've had a great day talking with Cam Hamilton. Again, if you want to see any of his projects, go to his webpage. Thanks for tuning in. If you've got any other comments, questions, any other subjects you want us to touch on, hit us on our webpage. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.